well, this competition should be perfectly fair and perfectly perfect in every way. And like the CrossFit Games aren't, like any judge sport anywhere ever aren't. Like I was a gymnast for a long time. You think every judge is nailing it every single time on that? That's why you have a panel and people. You have several judges judging the same routine, and there's you could have five judges seeing the same thing and seeing and judging it differently. And like that's the reality of judge sport. And I think that we need to accept a certain degree of um, of challenge and variability in online competition. It's an important piece of our sport, and it's an important tool for us to be able to get mass participation and move things into another stage. But it's not going to be perfect ever.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Invictus Mindset Podcast. Today's guest is a Canadian CrossFit Games athlete, a chiropractor, a husband, and a father, with 4 podium finishes at the CrossFit Games and making his 3rd appearance on the show. My man, Pat Vellner. Welcome to the show, dude.
Thanks, Bryce. Thanks for having me.
Stoked to connect with you. It's a popular time of the season. All the semifinals workouts have officially been released. There's anxiety, there's excitement, and seems to be that time of year where the stakes are getting a little bit higher. So thanks for joining me today, dude.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's always fun to be on.
As the workouts have gotten released, if you could kind of summarize them or give your 2 cents as a broad and inclusive kind of little opinion, what would you say so far after seeing them?
I think, there's still a lot to be revealed, I think.
Mm-hmm.
They're cool. There's some new stuff. There's some old stuff. Um, but because of that, I think there's a lot of questions still of how the floor is going to set up, what the actual movement standards will be for certain things, because they've kind of released the names of movements, which, we know or are familiar enough with, but if you're going to try to test it, there's kind of details that you need. So everybody's making their best guess. You try to picture what a competition floor looks like, and you take a crack at it, and you're still going to get valuable information. But I think it's still waiting to see that first week go and see what the floor looks like and see how the transitions look and what the standards are, and all those little details that become really important when you're trying to hunt for top spots, right? So there's still a lot of information out there that is going to keep us guessing for another week or so.
Spoken like a true veteran. The masterful transition game is incredibly important because you can be very fit at each one of the stations, but if you transition like an asshole, you're missing a lot of time. And so that's cool that you're taking note of that.
For sure. And I think, I was talking to another athlete today, just chopping it up about some of the semifinal stuff. And there was a time when if you did those things well, you were almost guaranteed to be successful because it just wasn't a skill that a lot of people had. But as the
Yep.
sport's grown a little bit and people have gotten a little wiser and a little more experienced, it's everybody's doing those things well now, so it's harder to catch that. So those little execution pieces, transitioning well, not making small mistakes, it's almost a prerequisite at this point. Like you have to be able to do those things and pay attention to those things, or you're really shooting yourself in the foot. So when these things come out and you have the skeleton of what this workout looks like, and you want to test it and get meaningful data, you have to think about those things. Oh, what potentially will this look like on a long competition floor? How are things going to move? How are the pieces going to play into each other? Because that totally can affect your game plan a lot. Like you said, I used to beat guys much fitter than me because I just was smart about when I moved and did things right. Some workouts when we advance the bar, 10 times in a workout, and then you run back to the rig, there's you could be running 400 meters by the end of that workout. And if you're walking every time, like you're losing a minute and change like over the course of that workout. So you can be smart and find success that way just by like plainly outsmarting your other competitors. But it's getting harder and harder to do that. So
Yeah,
it's
it's
fun to
so
talk to
true.
people about it and see everybody's kind of seeing the same things, and they're like, yeah, we gotta see what happens in the first week. And I don't compete until the second week, so I get a batch of guinea pigs to learn from.
For sure. There's a couple things to unpack there. when I was competing on Team Invictus, CJ was so good about having us like hug the hip of the athlete in front of us. So that way we could transition real quick. Once that barbell kissed the floor, and it wasn't being dropped from overhead, it was placed down. Exactly what you said. Like, we were able to beat people way fitter than us by just executing on some of the intangibles, or doing what the Patriots used to say, which is do your job. And
Yeah.
something that you pointed out that's also really interesting is with the growth of social media and YouTube channels, you can actually kind of study film on your competition a little bit. You can pick up tendencies, you can try to learn a few things. And I don't know, I feel like in the past that wasn't a big thing within CrossFit too much, other than personal video analysis of yourself via your coach of a lift or something like that, or how to get a little bit more efficient on certain movement patterns. But it's cool to see as the sport continues to grow, if I relate it to basketball or football, like, you're watching a lot of film. That's part of the training process. And I think it's cool that you're taking note of not just exercises, but transitions and some of the details to really elongate your career and continue to hit it with the best. And Pat, how are you feeling, man? You've been in the game longer than most people. Obviously, you're really smart. You're incorporating the pliability stuff. You've probably got all kinds of recovery techniques. How does it feel to know that like you're the seasoned veteran in the game? And what are some of the behind the scenes that you're willing to reveal that enable you to stay at the top of the sport?
It's funny. I wish I could tell you that it just, with experience like that, just comes this unshakable confidence that, you just kind of know what you're doing. But the sport progresses, right? And if you don't evolve, you get left behind. So I think you're always learning and always trying to figure out new ways to stay relevant and stay in those top heats and competing with those top guys. So it's hard. It's always stressful. Like you're always under the gun every time. Like every time you're on the floor, you do a competition workout in quarterfinals or whatever it is, you're being assessed every time. And those data points matter. And like you said, I'm certainly not afraid to watch people that I consider to be very good at certain things and see what they're doing that I might be missing, and try to learn from people who are plainly better than me at certain things. And that's how you have to improve. Like, yeah, you watch film, you figure out what people are good at, why are they good at it? What are they doing that you might be missing? And yeah, I mean, at this point in my career, there's certainly my training age is high. There's not a lot. I don't need to put a lot of effort in certain areas. Like my growth has been good over many years. So, at this point in my career, I don't need to beat myself down with a ton of training volume. It's more important for me to stay healthy. And I think that some of the volume that some of the 20-year-old kids are doing, I just wouldn't do.
Yeah.
It's a bad idea for me to do. I could do it for a month and then, my knees are going to go, or something's just like, you have to be a little bit, uh, you have to check your ego a little bit and just know, okay, I have done that too. Like I went through that phase of my career and I built up a very strong foundation and base, and I don't need to do much of that anymore. And so some of the focus is just on, putting the intensity in the right places, managing it in a way that's going to allow me to keep all the balls in the air that we need to do, and making sure that I don't completely burn out or explode before critical points of the season, right? So, just conversations you have with your coach and your team, and you got to be realistic with yourself. If things hurt or they suck, and you're really feeling overtrained, you got to say something,
Hmm.
which is hard for athletes to do sometimes. Your job
Very hard.
your job as the athlete is to be the hand, right? The coach can sit behind the scenes and pull the strings and make this big plan, and it's up to you to execute. So it can feel like you're not holding up your end of the bargain if you go into a training day and you dial some things back because this hurts or this isn't feeling well or whatever it is. But those can be super important decisions to make for longevity and over the course of a season. Nowadays there isn't much of an off season with some of the major invitational competitions. People can be competing every 3 months for, you know, 8 years, and
Yeah,
that
totally.
adds up, right? So you have to be smart. And, I'm fortunate that I actually work in kind of like physical care and conservative management of like musculoskeletal injuries. So I at least know often what the right decision is. Whether I
Hmm.
make that decision every time is not the case, but I think sometimes I can stand to take my own advice. But you do. I have a level of awareness that I think keeps me functioning and keeps my head above water most of the time.
Sometimes it's tug of war, right? Between like logically what you know is probably best for your body, but then emotionally you're like, man, I want to put in a little bit extra work. And, there's a mindset component too to getting in the extra reps and building your confidence. But like you said, you have the lifetime reps. And so backing off some of the more impactful things, or maybe the things that possess a higher risk. Trident Coffee is sponsoring this episode of the Invictus Mindset Podcast. My guys over at Trident taught me something really important this last year. That we are all a bundle of stories, both good and bad, and everything in between. At Trident, they're storytellers. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. They help create connections through symbology and storytelling that engage their customers on an emotional level, and this distinguishes them from other coffee brands. You can find Trident in Imperial Beach and in Coronado. They offer over 14 plus nitro cold brews along with dairy-free options. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from their keto bakery. All these options will allow you to support your health and fitness journey with Trident Coffee. They're more than just a coffee company. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code Invictus20 for 20% off online and in tap rooms. Once again, that's tridentcoffee.com. Use code Invictus20 for 20% off online and in tap rooms. Take your coffee experience to the next level. Two important factors for us over at Invictus Mindset are true care and attention to detail. My friends over at RX Smart Gear have been bringing innovative fitness tools to the market since 2009. From their award-winning Evo speed ropes, to their amazing gymnastics grips, to their line of inflatable fitness equipment, they're constantly looking to problem solve within the fitness industry. They're always allowing us to have our gear work for us rather than against us. Hop on over to RX Smart Gear and use discount code Invictus Mindset to shop their latest cutting-edge gear. Have your gear work with you and not against you. I mean, at this stage in your career, it's almost like your body and your level of intensity is an investment portfolio, right? Or where are you going to get the highest return on investment? And if not, it's like, all right, let's play with some mutual funds. Let's play with something a little bit lower risk that's going to ensure that you stay injury-free as you approach the high-level competition season.
Yeah, that's a good little analogy. But it is tough, right? And I think there's always, like you said, the tug of war of, what you if you whether I could know in my bones and my soul that, like, yeah, you shouldn't do this thing. It's hampering your ability to heal your whatever elbow. But your athlete brain is just wired to do the opposite, to ignore that stuff and shut it out. And so those things are just conflicting realities. Like your reality as like my reality as like a therapist and as an athlete are completely opposite. Sometimes it's nightmare treating athletes because they're just hardwired that way. Like, oh yeah, but I'm 3 weeks out from an event, and what am I going to do? I'm not going to not do it. Like I have to. This is the time.
It makes you really valuable though, because you can empathize, you can be compassionate, but you can also play hardball back. And so the fact that you're so well versed and you've played and you've been the man in the arena for so long, it just adds tools to your toolbox. And with that being said, obviously Michelle Letendre has been in the arena too. How's that game being played? Like, I know in the past you guys have had like fun little back and forth, and she pulls you or pushes you and you guys have fun, healthy conversations. How's that been this season?
It's been great. She's always been a pretty great, a great asset and influence in my career. It's been fun in the last couple of years because she's evolved a lot in her interests and her coaching as well. When she finished CrossFit, that was her world, right? And so I think a lot of the programming back then, 2016, 2017, was very CrossFit driven and CrossFit focused. And she got into weightlifting after that for a period, and her knowledge base in that world grew a lot, and we did a lot of things based on that. And in the last 2 years, 3 years, she's gotten a lot more into endurance sport, and she does a lot of triathlon and marathon running and that kind of stuff. And so again, she just is constantly learning, and her knowledge base on those things has just gotten huge. And she's training for triathlons and things. So it's like, hey, I want to try this with you guys, some of this style of interval training or this that I think will be beneficial, aerobic capacity building stuff. So we build a bunch of those things into our training based on things that she's learned and done with herself. So it's cool. And obviously my background is in gymnastics, so I don't need as much guidance in that world technically. So I mean, that's sort of the three major components of our sport is weightlifting and gymnastics and enduro sports. So we have between the two of us, we have a pretty good global understanding of what we need to do and how to attack most things. But I've always found it helpful. Like sometimes I just need I need tough love. And I think our relationship is very much that way. We don't sugarcoat anything between each other, and occasionally need to politely tell each other to back off. But I think that it's good, and that's just what we need, and what we're able to provide with each other. And I think that having her be she was a great athlete in the women's field for many years, and sometimes the women just see events different than the men do. It's like a different set of eyes on things that I can look at something and say, this is what my knee-jerk reaction is to this programming or this workout, and she might say, I'm seeing something completely different. And in a case like a semifinal or whatever, where you may have time to try a couple different things, you can say, all right, well, let's just for the sake of giving it a shot, well, we'll try this approach and then we'll try this other approach, and do some small intervals that way and just see what's what. And you learn something sometimes and be like, huh,
Yeah,
actually,
that's
yeah, I
cool.
mean, I was looking at this totally the wrong way, and there was a total other avenue that I would have missed if I didn't have, her trained set of eyes on it, which sees something very different than what I do.
I really appreciate you sharing that. That's so cool because you could have two separate opinions. Like you and I can disagree on something, but if you remain open minded and malleable enough to pick up, you made a really good point. I tried that. Now I can move the needle a little bit closer to your perspective rather than, oh, I'm not trying that at all. Like that's completely ridiculous. I think it's fun to make it a nice malleable perspective, and that perspective may work for you and then may not work for one of her other athletes. So it's very interesting to hear how you guys talk through things. When you mention tough love, does that mean like you prefer people to like talk a little bit of smack to you? Do you prefer like more of an empathetic style coaching? What's the style of like oorah or kind of the cheerleading that you prefer? And then also what's your personal self-talk kind of like?
So I guess that's kind of the thing is, some people would probably say that I'm quite cynical or pessimistic out of a lot of things, and
Mm-hmm.
I like to say that I'm realistic.
Mm.
I'm very much not someone who needs to be told they're great, or wants to be like, everything's going to be great and everything's going to be okay. And, if you just believe it, you can do it. I'm not here for that at all. Like, don't blow smoke up my ass. I'm not here for it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know the things that we do are hard. I know they're going to be hard. Don't write this workout for me and then tell me it's going to be fun, because it won't. I'm going to go in there and it's going to be hard, and I'm going to work really hard. And, the fun comes after the fact. Um, that type 2 fun of like, being proud of an accomplishment or happy you did something. But,
Yeah.
we go through a lot in our sport, and it's it's not fun most of the time. But we do it so that, when you have those moments in the sun in competitions, the sun shines bright and you can perform very well. And that's what it is. It's investment. Like, so don't, I feel like most of my self-talk is probably, for some people's taste, quite negative. But that's just how I look at things. Like I'm kind of looking for the next thing that can kill me. Like I don't want to sit there and celebrate every step along the way. Like I'm looking for the next obstacle immediately once I pass one. And I'm kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, this is the next thing. How do I prepare for that? Bad things will happen. Like, you will make mistakes. You need to be prepared to deal with that. In my eyes, the person who's always walking on clouds, like nothing can ever go wrong, isn't prepared when something goes wrong. And to me, there is no situation where you walk through a career in sport and you never miss. Like, you're gonna miss. You're
With
gonna
that
make
being
bad
said
decisions at
though,
the wrong
like
time.
do you feel I don't know. I heard Shaq kind of talk about it once, where it was like he always has this feeling like I'm not good enough. I always need to get better. And does that lead you to kind of always feeling very sympathetic? Are you able to get into a parasympathetic state where you can rest and digest? Or are you always striving? Where you're like, okay, I realistically know what this is going to take. Or do you take more of like a logical approach of, okay, I don't need to soften my parasympathetic approach. I just need to go to sleep right now. And it's just pretty stern. This episode is brought to you by HVMN, Health via Modern Nutrition. They launched the world's first ketone drink in 2017, and then in 2022 launched the version 2 of their exogenous ketone product line called Ketone IQ. I found that incorporating ketones into my morning routine increased my daily focus and energy. The beauty of this product is that you can stack it. It doesn't even have to replace your morning routine. My morning routine looks like taking the dog on a walk, hitting my daily shot of Ketone IQ, hopping in the cold plunge, and then finishing it off with a nice Trident coffee while I soak up some morning sunlight. Try out some ketones for yourself by using the code Invictus for 20% off Ketone IQ. Ketones are a super efficient fuel for your brain that leaves you feeling energized and clear-headed. Give it a shot. I promise you won't regret it. Once again, use code Invictus for 20% off Ketone IQ. Move fast and break shit. This is one of the core values at LSKD and something that we fully resonate with here at the Invictus Mindset Podcast. LSKD develops functional sportswear with a streetwear aesthetic that's on a mission to inspire you to chase the vibe through sport, fitness, and adventure. Through my experiences with LSKD products and their team members, I have found a brand that I can call home that keeps me performing at my highest level through fitness and business. I train daily in the rep shorts and love the versatility they offer, so I can go from training at the gym directly to meetings, client consults, running errands, or preparing for podcasts. The LSKB vibe has finally reached San Diego, and we want you to experience it too. Go to us.lskd.co to start shopping today. We want to inspire you to chase the vibe.
I struggle with that sometimes, particularly around competition, like being able to unwire yourself.
Yeah.
I try to imagine every situation, and your brain can run crazy. But I think that there's things that I've done in my life to help me be able to do that, and part of that is maintaining another career. Those sorts of things. Like I have a family, and I try my best not to eat, whether it's during semifinals or at the games, let that my sport dominate everything we do. Like, let's talk about other stuff. Talk about what my wife's doing at work. Like, play with your kid and let that stuff fade away into the background. And that stuff helps you to turn those things off. But I think definitely, like, I'm constantly looking for the next thing. I'm always trying to get better at something. And I think that's why I'm successful training on my own. I don't need training partners all the time to try to latch on to and pull me. Like I'm pretty good at doing that on my own, and just like creating a rabbit in my head, or creating a problem in my head, or creating something that's going to make me stay engaged for the duration of that session, or that workout, or whatever. So I don't know if that's a skill that I think it's probably a skill you develop over time. And I
Yeah.
may have done it out of necessity for when because I was always training by myself, and periods when I was at school, it was the same. I can go to the gym for a couple hours, 2, 3 hours, and then it's like I got other work to do, and I can't go home and study and have my mind wandering back to what I could have done or should have done in the workout. Like I had to turn the page and focus on something else. So I'm okay at that switching gears, but I'd be lying if I said at night in competitions if I didn't sit on my pillow and run through the workouts a couple
Yeah, of
times and try
course.
to go through that. So it's hard to avoid that, but I do my best.
It's just being a human, right? And something that's really cool that I think is important to note is because you train on your own, when you have family obligations or there's certain things that pull you, your attention, your responsibilities, your energy, your focus, that allows you to be a little bit malleable with your training. Sometimes when you're tied to a training camp, there's two set training times for the two sessions, and sometimes that interferes with your day-to-day life. And going through your Instagram, sometimes you're training at 6 a.m. And as you mentioned, the weights are a little bit heavier when it's still dark outside. And your knees, your joints still a little bit sore, but the fact that you have the personal intangibles and the discipline to apply your focus and the tricks of the trade that you've accumulated over the years is incredibly inspirational, because it allows you to still be a very present father and husband while simultaneously being an amazing chiropractor as well, which those things may not fit as well if you had training times that needed to synergize with other training folks.
That's definitely true. Yeah, I appreciate that. It's I'll particularly now. So in the last 2 months, we lost our childcare, so we don't have any childcare at the moment. So a lot of like all of my prep for the last while and everything like that is just been my wife and I juggling. So some days, based on her work schedule, I've got to get up early to do my session, and then I've got to do my second session late at night, or I've got to whatever. And we'll hire a babysitter for an afternoon now and then, and it just has to work when it has to work. So it is difficult to coordinate with people. And I think it's challenging for me sometimes to find people who are operating on the same sort of schedule as me. Like I'm a lot of days, particularly recently, I get to the gym and I got a hard out in like 2.5 hours. I've got to be out because my wife's got to leave to work and I've got to be home and take over with the baby. And then I've got time at home. I can stretch and do things at home with him, but um, I just don't have time to stand around and talk. And it's not again, this is sort of like, it's a job some days, and sometimes it is a little more enjoyable, and you have good days and whatever. But there's a lot of days where I'm like, I show up, members of my gym even are like, yeah, it's the day, like headphones are in. I'm not talking to anybody. I'm going to get through all my stuff. I'm going to get through it as fast as I can. And then I'm going to punch out and I'm going to go home and then like completely shift gears and live a totally different life. So yeah, I mean, the work's got to get done. It's the deal I made with myself a long time ago. Like even again, when I was at school, it was, if I wanted to do this thing, like you got to do it on top of the other thing. You don't get to cut into the other side of stuff. Like I try to, when we make plans with family or things like that, you stick to those things, and my workouts will go around those things. And
That's
then
really
same,
cool.
like,
I love that the workouts go around your life rather than life going around the workout. Sometimes you see high level CrossFit athletes where the sport kind of owns them, and then they either stop doing all the other things, or the other things definitely play second fiddle. And I also think hopefully, as we continue to grow this podcast and get more eyes and ears on it, I also think it's really important to note that when someone like yourself, or anybody for that matter, has a tight window and they're really focused in that particular day, it's not them being standoffish, it's not them being mean, it's them being really focused on the task at hand, knowing that they have obligations on the other side. And I think sometimes that gets misunderstood a little bit when you have high performers that need to draw those boundaries and aren't overly friendly in the midst of battle, I'll say, in a training session, or they have to run to a call. I sometimes think that gets misunderstood a little bit, at least a little bit in our training environment. I mean, today's a great example. I'm hitting a training session. I'm like, hey, I got to get home. I have a podcast at this time, and I don't have time to sit there and have a bunch of chit chatting like I normally do. And so I think it's cool that you absolutely shared that. And it's a human component that hopefully allows people to get a gentle lens of what it takes to be a high performer when you're in the pursuit of accomplishing a mission.
I think the biggest point is that it can look different. I think we get used to seeing it a certain way, and particularly in our space, a lot of the major media drivers are, like Mayhem and that kind of stuff, and they're all doing things a certain way, and there's more than one pathway to success. And I think that finding out what works for you is important. And if you identify certain things that work, continue to do that. Like there's no reason why you need to do it a certain way because somebody else is doing it that way. I think if I was in some of those camps, I would probably thrive for like 2 weeks, and then I would start to struggle. Because it just, I
Mhm.
don't know if that environment for long periods of time, like a year, would be great for me. I like to have a life outside of it, and I like to not to sort of compartmentalize things a bit and have CrossFit exist in one place and not necessarily touch my family life super bad, or things. But again, and I'd be lying if I said I don't do avoid certain things. I used to ski a lot more than I do now. So the sport does take over your life a little bit. Like things change for sure.
Mhm.
And probably when I retire, I'll start, mountain biking more or doing things like that that I just don't quite have the time for. Like the sport is my hobby, so all my hobby time is dedicated to that. Um, I don't really do a lot of other things outside of work and CrossFit at the moment. And it'll be like that probably until I retire, and then you can reshuffle the deck a little bit, and recommit to some other things that you've neglected for a little while. So, I'm not like out there doing anything I want any time of the day, but we try to make things fit so that there's time for family and there's time for friends, and you make those things, you set them up, and if I have to, I'll work the workouts around it. If I gotta fly across the country, like I'll get up at 4 a.m. and do my workout before we travel. If I know I'm gonna be traveling all day, like I just make it work, because that's part of the commitment. It's just like if it's on the page, I'm gonna do it. I'll find a way.
That's awesome. You've thrown the R word around a couple times, Pat. Is this something that
Oh,
is floating
retirement.
around the brain a little bit? Is that something that maybe you're thinking about or something you've talked about with your family? Like, what when I say the word retire, what kind of floats to the surface for you?
LMNT, pronounced element, is a tasty electrolyte drink mix with everything you need and nothing you don't. That means a science backed electrolyte ratio with none of the junk. No sugar, no coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, and most importantly, no BS. Whether it's after a long workout, hot yoga, or an intense sauna and ice session, I've been using Element to keep me hydrated and replenishing all of my lost electrolytes. So many of us wake up chronically fatigued, and the antidote to this is salt water. Salt has previously been blamed for blood pressure issues, but new research shows that replenishing salt and electrolytes can lead to more energy, no headaches, a clear mind, and enhanced focus. Use the link drinklmnt.com/Invictus Mindset to make any purchase of Element, and you will receive a free sample pack with all of the Element flavors. Once again, that's drinklmnt.com/Invictus Mindset.
I think it's, I've been saying it's closer now, closer to the end than I am to the beginning, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's the only way to look at it. Like, yeah, I'm trying to, when we go do things and compete, um, enjoy it maybe in a different way than I used to. I think early in my career, I was very head down and focused on certain things, and maybe my focus has changed a little bit, but I'm not going to competitions to not compete for top spots. And I've always kind of said, as long as I'm still competitive, I'm happy to continue to do it. It's a pretty good job, and there's a lot of people who want my job, and right now I want to make it as hard for them to take it as I can. So, uh, it's funny, and I would say I talked about with my partner about retiring when I was going to graduate school, like in 2019. Like we talked about that forever ago, and then the time comes and goes, and you're like, yeah, I'm still doing pretty well. This is going fine. I think we can make it work. So another bunch of years go by, and you move the marker, and you say, well, maybe we give it 3 more years. 3 more years comes by. We have a couple of other great years at the games, and you're like, hey, I mean, this is still working. Like, why are we in a rush to pull the plug? So, I don't know. I don't know when it'll be. I think at some point you just know from what I hear. And I would also be lying if I said I didn't do at least one workout every week where I was like, oh boy, what does retirement sound good right now? But it I think as long as I'm still having fun doing it, and I'm competitive in a way that I want to be and I'm proud of, um, I'll keep doing it. There's a limit. There's a limit to what I think your body and mind can take, but I think you know when you're there. So not there yet.
I like that answer. Closer to the end than you are at the beginning. And at least what I'm hearing is if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. And so as long as you're competitive and having fun, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here. Pat Vellner's still in the game. He's going to make it
I
real
always
tough
joke
for
with
you
the
to take
guys
the job.
every year, like the young guys will ask me at the Rogue Invitational, a couple were asking me like, when are you gonna hang it up already? And I'm like, boys, you can't ask me from like behind me on the leaderboard. If you're
Yeah,
like
I was going to say, when you're ahead
if
of me
you
on the
keep
leaderboard, you can ask me.
yeah, exactly. I'm just like, hey, look, if you're gonna keep making it easy for me, I'm not going anywhere. So that's kind of the running joke is if they got to displace me, and I'm not here to make that easy for anybody. So try to motivate that next generation a little bit and motivate myself while I'm at it.
That's the secret sauce for legacy, right? Kobe talked about that, which is, part of legacy is how are you motivating and inspiring that next generation? And something that you bring into the sport, which I greatly appreciate as a spectator and fan now, which is the smack talking, man. I heard you on Talking Elite Fitness discussing some of the semifinals workout, and with the handstand push-ups, you kind of threw Fikowski under the boat a little bit, and that's your boy. Your
Oh
Canadian
yeah, he'll be
friend, you
fine.
guys have battled a little bit, and you were like, hey, if he can get through those handstand push-ups.
I think you have to have a little fun with that. I think there is a lot of respect in our sport. Everybody kind of gets it. Like we're all doing the same things, right? We know it's hard. Um, but I don't know, that sort of thing's always, and it's always just sort of kind of been my attitude around it is you got to kind of keep it light and fun and go take the piss out of somebody. And part of that actually is, it helps with my nerves a little bit too. You sort of feel like things become a little less serious. So I've always found you can kind of identify who's down with that program and who's not. And everybody has a different approach. And to be honest, I'm not there trying to like mess with people's heads before they get on the floor. Like I'm not trying to stand in your way. But there are people who will also be pretty quick with a joke, and you go hit the ball back and forth with those guys, and you give each other some ribbing, and then you both feel better, and you go on the floor. So I'm like I'm good for it, but I try to be sensitive to like you not go find someone who's this is gonna like rock their world, and they're gonna go out there and bomb the event because of something you said to them right before. Because that's not cool. I'm not super interested in trying to do that. Maybe until it's like the
You're
games
not
or
trying to
finals or
be
something like that.
you're not trying to be the Draymond Green of CrossFit.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should. Maybe I should just say forget it. Maybe in like my last couple of years of competing, I'll go full villain and like try to just be psychologically torture everybody and try to get a win or something like that. But I don't know. It's just I've never really thought much about it. It's just kind of something that comes naturally to me to just go and kind of find the people, give them a hard time. A lot of the people you're doing it with, we're familiar with each other. We've competed against each other many times, and so you kind of know at least enough about people. But yeah, I know we need more of that. I agree. Uh,
Speaking
I
of
don't know.
villains, man, you and I have definitely observed and been in the CrossFit space for quite some time now. And when you take a look at things like movement standards, some of the controversial things that we've seen over the years, you mentioned as these events get released for semifinals, you have a skeleton approach. But there are details that you're not going to know until briefing, or at least be able to observe week one. What are your thoughts, with regards to, some of these gymnastics complexes, with regards to the toe to ring dip, toe to ring, muscle up, then ring dip, the pirouettes that we're probably going to be seeing, the seated legless rope climb that doesn't discuss the descent at all. When you see some of these things that, you're probably going to have a little bit of a gymnastics advantage, I would say, just based on your lifetime reps. But then we're uncertain about, hey, in lane 6, is it going to be this way? But then in lane 3, is it going to be this way? How are we going to figure out the consistencies within the sport of CrossFit? And what are your thoughts on some of these standards that are a little bit controversial in the space?
I think that as simple is better, right? When we're trying to look at making things fair, lane to lane, the less subjective components you can have, the better, right? So It'll be interesting to hear what they decide to do with that, but I certainly have thoughts about how it would be easier. And I think the easier we make the job for the judges, the fairer it's going to be, and the better the competition's going to run. You're going to have less appeals, you're going to have less scandal. Um, I think I don't understand why they won't release the standards ahead of time. I think also giving the athletes a chance to practice the standard you have written means that they will come and perform the standard better to what you expect.
And
If
if
they
they
have
don't,
to,
there can be a penalty.
yeah, like if they have to learn it in 20 minutes and then do it, they're it's not as polished, right? Give people a chance to put a good product on the floor. So, but that said, as athletes, we just have to take information we have and make the best decision you can, right? So you look at things like the seated rope climb, even just looking at verbiage and saying like, all right, what last year at the games they were trying to do this L rope climb standard that never happened because of the weather. But how was it written on the page? And I think it was written as seated legless rope climb, but it was briefed as an L rope climb up and down. So, if you're going to practice that workout, why not practice it as the L rope climb up and down? And then if it's not that and it's just seated legless, you got to start seated. Your legs can drop once you're off the ground. Once you touch the beam, you can let go. If it's that, you're going to have a great day. It's going to be much easier. And I would say that second standard is a better one for them to use because there's less areas to be super subjective. Oh, is that an L? Oh, is that, did you quite get under the tape? Did you whatever? Like the more variables you introduce, the more ways there are to make a mistake. So, one like that, the pirouette's a bit of an interesting one because we only have seen that once last year, but it was you walked into the box, you spun, you walked out of the box. So the question is, do you walk in? And I think for the individuals, at least, we have to do 3 reps. Do you walk in and do 3 spins and walk out? Do you walk into one box, do a spin, walk into another box, do a spin, walk into another box, do a spin? How do you differentiate these reps? And I think we just have to make a guess. Like to me, the 3 boxes probably makes the most sense because it's easy to delineate. Once I've done the spin and walked out of that box, that rep is complete. But it could be it's in the middle of a 25-foot section and you walk in and in the middle you do a spin and you have to walk the whole rest of the way to get the rep. Who knows? Again, just the more objective, the better. And the box over one, I expect that we're probably going to be either I don't think it's going to be a box jump over because in quarterfinals they wrote burpee box jump over 30 inches and they have now written burpee box get over 30 inches. If it was a burpee box jump over, I assume they would have wrote it as such. So you have to think of what other types of get overs have we done in the past. Does that just mean you're allowed to do a step over? You don't necessarily have to jump. Does it mean we're allowed to use our hands? Does it mean whatever? So, and you just look at old workouts and try to be like, hey, where have we seen this before? Can I make an educated guess for my practice? And if you can, or you're between 2 options, pick the harder one. And then,
Yeah.
Train hard and compete easy. Like if you show up and it's an easier version than you practiced, hallelujah. And you can just roll in and have that much more confidence going through that movement. But I think I find it a little bit, frankly, I find it a little annoying that they don't release more of those details going in. Because it's not the games. I get that we want to have some surprise components at the games, where you have very little prep time. This is still relatively little, but it's sort of an unfair advantage to weeks 2 and 3 and 4 who are going to see what they did in week 1, and now we get to take that information and practice it. But everybody who's week 1, if they don't get the standards until they show up there for the briefing, you've got to learn this on the fly. And then you're going to have more people who have a less polished rep. And now you have judges really looking at it going, I have to make a call on
Mm-hmm.
this. And it makes their job more difficult. So it's sort of like set yourself up for success in my mind. Like you're setting up the judges and the athletes for more success if you just give us a little bit more information when you release those workouts. So we'll see. And
Totally.
it may come out in the next little bit. I don't know.
Totally. And you brought up a really good point, though, where you said that you're only really competing against the people at your semifinal. And so
they have the same information that you're going to have when you get out onto the field. So it's not like you're going to be competing against the week one or the week one of semifinal people. So that definitely makes it a little bit more of a even playing field for sure. And the other thing that's so interesting is judging, I think, some of these high caliber athletes versus maybe athletes that aren't as known or maybe that don't carry the same notoriety, I think is interesting, right? Like you and I both know it's a lot harder to no rep Rich Froning than it is to no rep me. And I think that is something that should be taken into consideration. What are your thoughts on, some of the judging challenges? Because we're starting to see a lot of money being kicked around in the sport. So judging matters, and the delineation between lanes matters, and the judging standards matter. And so what are your thoughts on that? And what do you think is a potential solution to make sure that it's consistent, even, and fair across the board, and there's not an emotional component of, if I no rep this person, I'm gonna have to deal with their agent, I'm gonna have to deal with X, Y, and Z, creates all this controversy. I'd rather just keep it easy. I'll give them the rep even though it's close.
It's hard because our community is not, it's pretty tight. Like we have a pretty tight community. A lot of people know the judges that are out on the floor, have previous relationships with them. And I will say it sometimes bounces the other way. Like I've seen people get no reps from a judge that I don't understand it. Like you could watch the video back 100 times and be like, I don't know what they saw that they took the rep away for, but I don't know if it was a power move to be like, hey, I just wanted to no rep Matt Fraser. And then you're like, I don't know, like it just sometimes things like that happen, and you don't know the psychology that goes around it. But the reality is, judge sports are incredibly difficult to just get right. Um,
Mhm.
and a lot of judge sports are always going to have issues here and there. And when we're trying to look at judging, in a single workout, you could be making hundreds of judgment calls and then doing that for 14 events. There's a lot of area for something to fall apart. I think CrossFit's done a reasonable thing with their new appeals rule, the two appeals rule. I like that. I just think there's difficulty with some things not being appealable by their rule book. Um, and I don't
What's
know.
an
I don't
example?
know. I don't know if there is an answer. Well, like a judgment call, like a no rep squat depth, is not appealable.
Mm.
So if I could show a video from even their live stream being like, I'm clearly below depth. What are you talking about? I bottomed out that squat. They can't overturn that. There are some people playing with new ways to look at it. I know the Rogue Invitational this year was using video replay in their sprint elimination workout to try to run through appeals quickly there. But it's hard. Either way, you're making a judgment call. Now you're asking the head judge to overturn the judge on the field, and um, you know, it's hard. I think the best you can do is set yourself up for success by creating standards that are as objective as possible. Um, and I think that's why movements like a burpee box jump over are a great movement compared to a burpee box jump stand up all the way or whatever, or a box jump over compared to a box jump. Where like instead of the box jump, now I got to look at your knee angle and your hip angle and did you stand up all the way and were your feet mostly on the box? It's just did you get to the other side? Did any part of you touch the box other than your feet? Those are the only two things I need to care about, and it's very, very black and white. The more things that you can do that have that kind of a thing, the better. So
You
you can
summarized it
get
well.
really
Simple is
technical with it.
better.
Always,
There
yeah.
it is.
And we have it's fun to have complicated movements, and it's exciting, and stuff like the ring complex is going to be different, right? And I think it's novel, and novelty's good, and it pushes the sport forward. But I hope that the judges that they are using have some video resources for this new thing they're going to have to judge that they can look at and get used to seeing before they see it on the competition floor. If the very first time you're seeing this movement is at full speed in a race on a competition floor, you got a big problem.
Oh yeah.
Because it's different to
Especially with a
be.
ruck bag involved for sure, where you're going to see a little bit more of like a strict movement, and people that are traditionally able to crank out ring muscle ups are definitely going to have a little bit more of a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just we hear that kind of excuse all the time with somebody does something different on the competition floor, or finds some way around a rule or something, or applies a new technique, and they're completely unprepared for it. And the answer we always get is, well, nobody tried to do that in the demo. Like nobody who demoed this workout even thought of that. And it's like, well, the difference in environment matters. Like those people demoing, like I know what you want. I know what you want to see when you tell me to do a strict muscle up. The question is not what do you want to see perfect. The question is what counts. Because suddenly when I'm doing it and I'm on my 30th rep and I'm tired and I'm in a race with a guy right next to me, there's going to be maybe a little corner cutting going on. And where's the limit? And like those demo people or testers are not in that environment or faced with that problem. So they're doing the reps slow and smooth and steady. And oh yeah, every rep's perfect. But that's not what the environment is. You need to be, I think that like video resources for judges, especially when you're creating a new movement, like they should have a video of whatever, put Boz with a ruck bag on his back and say, do a set of 5 of these ring complexes at unbroken, whatever, like at speed. And then we're going to have the judges do it. And like, mix in a couple bad lockouts in there and see if we can pick them out. But it should be done at game speed. Because the problem that I think that we have is you do this one judges course at the start of the year, and they show you the good reps and bad reps, and you got to judge them, and they're comical. Like they're so embellished that it's so clear. Like, oh, was this squat to depth? And it's like a quarter squat, and you just know. Like, and that's not what it looks like on a competition floor with high level athletes moving at full speed.
It's a really good point. It's absolutely a really good point. What are your thoughts on some of the controversy that we've seen on this topic with the gentleman Hillerfit and, his kind of video takes? Sometimes it's pulling athletes down and probably trying to build his brand a little bit. But I think early on it was definitely like, hey, let's try to clean up the sport. I don't know him super well, but I know he's interjecting himself into the sport a little bit. And what are your thoughts on that?
I haven't seen any of his stuff recently. I think I agree with you. It started a little better than it has gone. I think it's turned a little bit. And I don't know. I think that there are areas that I think he has a good point. I think there are areas where he's digging a little too deep, and it's not worth the what he's trying to talk about there. And I think it's really easy to complain, and it's difficult to kind of come up with solutions sometimes. So I think he's very quick to wave his finger or complain about something, but he doesn't always have a lot of good solutions. So, I'm sympathetic to the athlete who, feels like somebody got an easier shake and it kept them out of semifinals and whatever. But I think the reality that we are facing is his criticism is heavily around online competition. And online competition is extremely flawed. It is just a reality of it. I think it's not equivocal to a live competition. So yeah, are there things that we can do to make it better? Again, I think just like changing movement standards or rules to be as objective as possible, selecting the right type of movements to include in online competition that are easy to judge or easy to review. Those sorts of things are just, again, setting yourself up for success. And I think that, yeah, if you want to, like, you could throw a rock and hit 100 bad videos or whatever in an online competition. And, if you want to scrutinize everybody's video, you'll find like a rep here or there, and then you can crucify that person. But like, that's not really helpful.
No, it's not.
And I think that
and the
we need to
solution that I think could be out there is testing centers.
This episode is brought to you by Mush. My friends over at Mush created an incredibly cool product of ready-to-eat overnight oats. And for those of you that listen to the podcast often, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And Mush has done just that, as their products have no more than 7 clean ingredients that are dairy-free, gluten-free, with no added sugar. Mush started right here at Invictus, as they had a vision to create convenient, healthy, and clean nutrition. And this landed them on Shark Tank, where the famous Mark Cuban invested in them. Now they're found in retailers all over the country, including Costco, Sprouts, Target, and Whole Foods. Check out my friends over at www.eatmush.com.
Right, like the same way you take tests for credentials or licensure for certain job things. What if there's some cool testing centers and it's like, hey, we have credentialed judges there, and maybe they work for CrossFit HQ, so they've got a pretty good eye. And let's say they're scattered throughout each region, and so you go and perform the workouts there, as opposed to potentially at an affiliate where you have your friend or said person that has a personal connection to you that may have a gentle bias. What are your thoughts on that as a potential solution? Is it too costly?
I think it may be an effective solution for quarterfinals. I think the other problem with it is it'll reduce registrations. It will reduce registrations for quarterfinals.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And that's reduced income for CrossFit, and I don't think they're as inclined to do that. So that's like, yeah, there's a potential there, but it's a balance, right? Like there's no perfect solution. And so I think that's the problem is we get kind of hung up being like, well, this competition should be perfectly fair and perfectly perfect in every way. And like the CrossFit Games aren't, like any judge sport anywhere ever aren't. Like I was a gymnast for a long time. You think every judge is nailing it every single time on that? That's why you have a panel and people, you have several judges judging the same routine. And there's, you could have 5 judges seeing the same thing and judging it differently. And like that's the reality of judge sport. And I think that we need to accept a certain degree of um, of challenge and variability in online competition. It's an important piece of our sport, and it's an important tool for us to be able to get mass participation and move things into another stage. But it's not going to be perfect ever. There will always be issues like that. So I think the sooner we kind of grow up over it and say, hey, like, yeah, there is. We can try it, and I don't think that means we should stop trying to improve little things. But I think it means that we can't, like, you have to, sometimes it's going to happen and you're going to have to just be like, yeah, that one sucked. And that one got away. And like, that was a blown call, but like they blow calls in every sport all the time. Like, it's just not,
100%.
yeah, I think that the community feels a sense of control over and I don't want to say entitlement, but like, where everyone's a part of this machine, right? And that's the whole point of the open. And that's kind of a cool thing about our sport is that we have this touch point where everybody does it. And it's such a cool piece of it. And I think, we risk, if we keep complaining and trying to tinker and over control, we kind of risk losing it or changing it in a way that it's not recognizable. Which I'm a competitor in the sport. That's great for me, but that's not necessarily great for, the CrossFit community as a whole and what they want to see, you know, be that major touch point for everybody in the community. And, the grandma of who's there working out with her grandkids and the whatever, like the open serves a lot of cool purposes. And I think that, we kind of forget that sometimes when we get really into the weeds over the judging and the sport side of it and all these sorts of things.
Pat, you've got some incredible lenses, man. I mean, when you do embark on that R word in the future, that retire component of your life, I really do think that specifically you and Brett Fikowski can really help move the needle as to the evolution of this sport. I think early on, we saw that the Jason Kalipas, the Becca Voits, the Chris Clevers, a bunch of them kind of really pushing the needle a little bit on the evolution of the sport. And I think you guys are kind of next in line, and it's really cool to hear your lenses, that they're not just biased into the sport, but also understanding the inclusivity of the entirety of the community. And something I've been thinking about a lot on our conversation and just humbly observing you from afar is, as you've been navigating training, life's got busier. You've lost childcare temporarily. Your wife's getting busy. Your son's getting older. Your chiropractic business is still something that you are very passionate about. Has your level of intrinsic motivation elevated, knowing that like your son's processing the world now? Now he doesn't just like, oh yeah, that guy's kind of my dad. It's like, hey, I'm going to try to copy what he's doing. Hey, I'm going to see him doing certain things. I'm going to feel his energy. I'm going to feel his vibe. Like, is that something that floats in your brain a little bit around an additional source of motivation, that you are the example to him?
It's kind of funny. I know, like, I know I should say yes, but I think it's not that simple. If I'm at the gym and I'm there, like I'm at work, I'm immersed in what I'm doing, and to be honest, I'm not really thinking about my family or anything. I'm thinking about task at hand, what I need to do for this, whatever it is I'm doing. But I think you start to feel it more and more, like just being around him. I'm certainly very fortunate that, and one thing that this sport has allowed me to do and given me is I have a cool kind of flexibility in my work. Like you mentioned, I can move my sessions around things if I need to. I come home and I get to spend a big chunk of the day in the middle of the day with my toddler. And not a lot of people have that luxury. And I have a huge level of appreciation for the freedom that, has come with being as successful as I've been. And having time to be like, I can move this session. I can do this at home. I'll work out while Owen's sleeping, and then he gets up from his nap and I'm working out outside, and I hang some low rings and he goes and plays on the rings and does somersaults while I'm squatting or whatever. And I get to kind of do those things with him and be around um, and like watch him learn and be a good role model for him. I think, you hope that in years time, when he's a little more, uh, a little more connected with the world, that he can look back and see, hey, like I did all these cool things, and that was something that, we can all be proud of and look back as a cool chapter of our lives. But I think it's just cool to be able to have the freedom to be able to spend more time with him and be around him and do those things. And that's something that, like I said, not a lot of people get, and I'm certainly, it's not lost on me what a luxury it is. And I hope that, like you say, at some point when I move past competing in the sport, you're able to kind of continue to build it in some way or stay involved in some way. And again, I'm very tapped into the side as an athlete. I've been a competitor in the sport the whole time. I don't own a gym. I don't, I'm a shadow and as a member at the gym, because I'm usually just kind of in the corner doing what I need to do. But I joke with my peers that I compete with that I just hope they miss me when I stop. Like that's the best
You've
thing
definitely left an
that I
impact,
could do.
man.
The
You've
best thing that
definitely
they
left
could
a
do is
tremendous
just
impact.
just miss me when I leave, and I hope I'll be able to float around, and you know you hope to provide some meaningful input that helps things improve in some way, and leave things better than you found them.
Yeah, man. And you're absolutely doing that. And I've been able to dance a little bit with some of the different media folks in the CrossFit community. And there's four names that seem to be dancing around a little bit as podium contenders. That's Roman, Justin Medeiros, Jeffrey Adler, and your name seems to be getting thrown around in there. When I say that, the goosebumps arise. I see a little smirk on your face there. You've been close a few times, Pat. When I say that, what are some of the emotions that come up, and is this the year that you're like, you know what, I've got an opportunity. I mean, we got Ricky Garrard not competing this year, and it's a very special opportunity for you that I'm rooting for you, man.
Yeah, I mean, I laugh because it's not the first time. I mean, I've had the opportunity many times, and it's actually very cool to still be in that conversation, that people are like, hey, well, yeah, like he's still relevant, and I still am seen as someone who can contend. And that sort of thing does keep me motivated. Like I think it's, you earn that the right to be in those conversations with a body of work. So I have a very hard time. I don't have, like I said before, like that extreme unflappable confidence that like I can do no wrong out there. Um, Everybody's chasing something and it's hard to get. So even just like to have people say that, it's kind of cool to be like, yeah, you have been doing something really well for a long period of time, and you've earned the right to be in those conversations. But you got to continue to earn it, right? You can't just because they say, hey, this guy could contend for a spot or could win it, you got to go do it, right? And it would be my pleasure to prove them right. um but I've had years where I have done that, and I have years where I have not done that. So I've kind of been on both sides of that coin. So I know it doesn't mean a lot until you work it into existence.
That's cool, man. Well, hopefully that little seed planting gives some extra motivation as you approach semifinals. And as we wrap things up, man, You think you'll ever go team? You think you'll ever play in the Masters division in the future? What's going on
I
there?
feel like I get asked that a lot now.
I mean, I
I
saw you
don't
in
know.
Team Jay. I got excited when I saw you out
Yeah,
there with those guys.
yeah, I know. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. Like I think I haven't looked past my career as an individual yet. I'm still committed to competing at a high level there. And we'll learn a lot about this year in the next coming weeks, what that's going to look like. But I don't know. I think there's possibility. Team really matters where you are, right? I don't see myself uprooting my life to go move somewhere and be on a certain team. My wife works extremely hard. We have a family. Like it's just that's an unrealistic thing for me, and it kind of always has been. But if there are people around who want to do it, I could maybe do that for a little bit. I think my expectations would change significantly. Um, and it could only go one of two ways. I would either need to be on a team that was planning to be highly competitive, or I would need to be on a team with an understanding that like we're gonna go have fun, we'll hopefully make it to the games, and I'm taking a step back as an athlete, commitment wise. And like you may not be getting Pat Vellner of yesteryear. You may be getting like a somewhat dialed down version of what you hope for. Um, but I don't know, there's a chance if I did that, I could just sort of ride my current fitness level for a year or two and slowly peter out, but and have some fun while I'm doing it, stay involved in the sport. And I don't know about masters. I think, it's funny. I'm almost going to be masters age soon here. I'll be 33 at the games this year, so I've got one more year of open division eligibility after that, and then I'll be masters eligible. So I don't know. I think it would be fun to still compete as an individual in the open division at masters age at least once. But I don't know. 35 is not really masters in my eyes. I mean, come on.
Yeah, show those young
But
bucks
we'll
how to
see.
do
There's
it, man.
potential there. I haven't flipped those stones over yet. It's not worth it yet. I'm worried if I look too close, I might find something I like, and then I might be less committed to my individual career for the next little while. So I need to stay focused on that.
Yeah, totally, man. Let's make sure the lasting impact of this conversation is you in the podium conversation with some of those other folks, so that translates to elevated training stimulus in these next couple weeks. Man, it's such a
That I can
pleasure to
do.
cross paths with you, and I love playing ping pong with you and kind of sharing some of your insights. I know you had a really awesome tutorial with the Talking Elite Fitness crew, kind of going through the different semifinals workouts. But as we conclude things today, Pat, you're a very well versed man. You're a jack of all trades. You're a family man. You're a father. You're a chiropractor. You really are open and well spoken around things like recovery and deload weeks. If you could give maybe some advice to the younger generation, because the sport is now starting with these teen athletes and even younger, and trying to mitigate burnout, trying to make sure the sport continues to grow and evolve. What's some advice that maybe you'd like to share with this up and coming generation to preserve their bodies, make sure they're having fun and still seeking peak expression without burning out or getting injured too soon?
I mean, it can be a long career. I think that one of the fun things I'm trying to do and show is, for years we didn't know what the impact was. Nobody was competing at past 30 in the men's division. Like there was just it didn't exist. People's careers were 4 or 5 years. Um, and now we're seeing people competing for 10. And, could we see people compete for 15? Yeah. But it's a long career. Like it can be long. There's no rush. You don't even need to rush into competing at the games. Like I competed a full career in sports before I started ever doing CrossFit. And I get messages from people who are like, "Do you think it's too late to start? I want to try to compete and go to the games." Who are, in their early 20s, and I'm like, man, yeah, like if you start now, you're well ahead. What I was, right? Like there's a long time. Learn your skills, and don't take it too seriously to start, but put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to get on a competition floor and put yourself out there because that's the best way to learn. And one of the hardest things in our sport is that there's not a lot of touch points. You don't get a lot of games. You play 5 games a year, maybe if you're ambitious, 4, maybe 3. So there's not a lot of space to learn. So getting out to local competitions, doing the dance a few times, learning about yourself, and how you handle stress, how you deal with this whole thing is super valuable. And there's lots and lots of time and opportunity to do that. So, just take your time with it. It can be a long career. Don't stress.
I appreciate you, my man. Those of you listening, those are some wise words from legendary CrossFit competitor Pat Vellner. If you enjoyed my conversation with Pat today, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And as always, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Till next time, guys. Thanks, Pat.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Are you over 35 and in need of a solid training program? Are you looking to improve your athleticism and keep up with the younger athletes in your CrossFit gym? Then look no further than our Invictus Masters program. This program places year-round emphasis on mobility and stability exercises with movements that we have seen directly benefit our Masters athletes. Our program is led by Nicole DeHart and offers a training program designed specifically for Masters athletes who are looking to compete at a higher level in the sport of CrossFit. Some of our top Masters athletes in the world train with us, including CrossFit Games champion Kevin Kester, Matt Beals, and Pat Sprague. You can learn more about their stories and the Invictus Masters program by checking out their episodes right here on the Invictus Mindset Podcast. If you'd like more information about the current training cycle or to join the Invictus Masters program, please email Nicole at invictusathlete.com. That's NICHOLE at invictusathlete.com.